Communications industry executives were at a Senate Commerce Committee hearing to talk about new wireless technology and a series of auctions managed by the FCC to allocate wireless spectrum for these new devices and applications. This is 2 hours.
Good morning. On behalf of my friend Senator Schatz and I'm glad to convene the first hearing of the Subcommittee on Communications Technology, Innovation, and the Internet for the 115th Congress. So welcome to you all. As we all know, in today's connected world, the demand for spectrum increases with every new technology. Spectrum is the lifeblood of this connectivity, improving the lives of people around the globe. Our discussion of spectrum policy today comes on the heels of this committee's approval of the Mobile Now Act. Under Chairman Thune's leadership, we have taken a significant bipartisan step toward freeing up spectrum for the next generation. And people should silence their devices, by the way. But right on key. Thank you, Senator. For the next generation of wireless services, with the approval of this legislation, I hope to see Senate passage of the bill in the near future. Our discussion of spectrum policy should continue. With rapid growth in the use of mobile devices and the Internet of Things, demand for spectrum will only increase. Spectrum for mobile broadband is giving rural America the tools and resources it needs. Applications that utilize mobile broadband provide the means to deliver quality health care in the most remote corners of our states and transmit real-time data for improved crop production on our farms. Satellite services are providing television, broadband, and Earth observation for a variety of applications. Next-Gen TV has the potential to deliver better emergency services and ultimately save lives. This is particularly important to states like Mississippi that can be situated in the paths of hurricanes, tornadoes, and other natural disasters. Unlicensed spectrum offers opportunities for businesses of all sizes to innovate and continue to fuel the vast expansion of the Internet of Things. Although innovation demands more efficient spectrum use, innovation will also be what solves the problem of limited spectrum. We're here today to talk about the value of spectrum to the economy. We are here to talk about what we have learned from the FCC's recent spectrum auctions and how unlicensed spectrum is a vital piece to the puzzle. I also hope our discussion will encourage a focus on the future of spectrum policy and set the stage for this committee to look at ways to address spectrum demand. I would like to welcome all of our witnesses, and I will introduce them in a moment after we have turned for an opening statement to our colleague, Mr. Schatz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening this hearing and to the witnesses for being here today. Spectrum is the invisible infrastructure that has become the on-ramp to access the Internet. Thanks to mobile and wireless technologies, people can read the news, transfer money, watch shows, video chat with a doctor, all from their mobile device. In a very short time, these technologies have transformed our lives. With new 5G wireless networks and the Internet of Things, demand for spectrum will continue to grow. The value that spectrum delivers to the economy is hard to overstate. As we will hear from the witnesses today, spectrum generates new investments, facilitates innovation, supports job growth across a range of industries. Advancements in mobile and wireless clearly benefit consumers and most industry sectors, have also revolutionized citizen engagement in politics, transformed news, and enhanced public safety. Although the focus of today's hearing is on the economic benefits of commercial spectrum, it is vital to point out that the federal government also has critical spectrum needs for national security, transportation, weather forecasting, and a wide range of other government services. So we must continue to work with the agencies to ensure that they have the spectrum resources they need now and in the future. But we should also build on the successes of the Spectrum Relocation Fund to make it more attractive for agencies to vacate or share bands with more commercial users where that is possible. Since we can't create more spectrum, we need to be more creative in how we manage competing spectrum needs. I'm confident that industry will find innovative ways to make better use of the bands that they have, but we also need to find a balance between the competing public and private sector needs for more terrestrial and satellite capacity, and the need to have adequate spectrum available for both licensed and unlicensed uses. Spectrum policy has been a priority for this Congress and this committee, which has passed the Mobile Now Act, and which would make more licensed spectrum available and facilitate the deployment of supporting infrastructure for 5G. Mobile Now also includes a bill that Senator Moran and I introduced that will require the government to develop a national plan for unlicensed spectrum. While a lot of attention focuses on how to make new frequencies available for the licensed side, we also need a clear plan to support continued innovation in the unlicensed bands. These shared bands have become an affordable way for people to get online. Consumers benefit, technology companies benefit, and ISPs benefit from unlicensed spectrum. I trust that the committee will continue to work with the agencies and stakeholders to make more bands available to commercial users over the coming weeks and months. While we do that, though, we also have a responsibility to ensure that people from all walks of life, especially in rural, isolated, or hard-to-reach areas across the country, have access to wireless broadband services. I know that the chairman and many of our colleagues on the committee share this point of view. To pursue new spectrum opportunities, every stakeholder must be an effective partner in this conversation. A fully staffed FCC led by a chairman and 4 commissioners is therefore critical to accomplishing these goals. I am appalled that the White House withdrew all pending nominations for federal commissions. That is an unnecessarily provocative act. The administration should defer to congressional leaders on both sides of the aisle on nominees for these commissions, as has been the norm. Of specific relevance to this committee is Commissioner Rosenworcel's nomination. She has been a leader on spectrum policy and a strong advocate for consumers. I hope that the White House will renominate her and the Senate will keep its commitment to confirm her, as we should have done a year ago. Thank you, Chairman Wicker, for initiating this important discussion, and I look forward to the witnesses' testimony.
Thank you very much, Senator Schatz. We have a distinguished panel that we are looking forward to hearing from at this point. Our witnesses include, from left to right, Mr. Scott Bergman, Vice President of Regulatory Affairs, CTIA, the Wireless Association. Mr. Roger Entner, Founder and Lead Analyst, Recon Analytics. Mr. Dave Heiner, Vice President and Deputy General Counsel, Microsoft Corporation. Mr. Pat LaPlatney, President, CEO, Raycom Media. And Mr. Tom Stroop, President, Satellite Industry Association. Now, we have a lot of people are prepared, come long distances, and put a lot of thought into this hearing. We have votes at the top of the hour, but we want to be respectful of the time and preparation of our witnesses. So it is the chair's intention to proceed on with the testimony, and members will simply proceed in and out during the 2 votes, I think, which will begin at the top of the hour. And I think we'll be able to proceed in that fashion without having to recess and take the valuable time of these participants. So we'll begin to my left, and Mr. Bergman, you're recognized for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Schatz, and members of the subcommittee. On behalf of CTIA, thank you for the opportunity to speak about the significant economic contributions of the U.S. wireless industry. The power of wireless is transforming how we live and work in every community across the country and in every sector of the economy. And we're about to have a breakthrough with 5G, the next generation of wireless. 5G will add trillions of dollars to our economy and 3 million new jobs, from 333 in Tupelo to nearly 3,500 in Honolulu. To deliver on this promise, the wireless industry needs this committee's continued leadership to deliver more spectrum and modernize infrastructure siting policies. The wireless industry today is a powerful contributor to the U.S. economy. Our members have invested over $300 billion over the last 10 years and are responsible for more than 4.6 million jobs. Consumers and businesses continue to adopt mobile broadband, with data traffic increasing more than 25 times since 2010 and expected to increase another 5 times by 2021. America's wireless industry stands ready to invest another $275 billion to deliver 5G networks that will be faster, more responsive, and connect more devices. 5G will enable a new generation of smart communities and unlock the Internet of Things. It will unleash innovation and growth in industries across our economy, from energy, healthcare, public safety, and transportation. With mHealth, smart grids, and self-driving cars, 5G will unlock trillions of dollars of economic benefits and help save thousands of lives. The U.S. has been the global leader in 4G LTE deployment, and we're poised to lead in 5G. But the global competition is fierce. China, Japan, South Korea, the EU are all in the chase, making spectrum available, streamlining siting, and investing. The keys to U.S. leadership are sound spectrum and infrastructure policies. Licensed spectrum in particular is a key input in mobile networks and a powerful creator of economic growth and jobs. Fortunately, Congress and the FCC have taken bipartisan steps to make spectrum available for wireless. Now, more work remains to enable 5G leadership. Let me highlight a few steps that the committee can take. First, we must ensure timely access to new spectrum made available through the 600 megahertz incentive auction. The auction will deliver 70 megahertz of spectrum for mobile broadband and 14 for unlicensed use. It raised $19.6 billion, making it the second largest FCC auction ever. We support a seamless repacking process and are committed to working collaboratively to achieve the FCC's 39-month schedule so that 5G is not delayed. Second, the FCC's decision to dedicate high-band spectrum to mobile services was also critical. The FCC can enhance those rules by making targeted reforms and by acting on the additional 18 gigahertz of spectrum identified in the Mobile Now Act. Third, we appreciate this committee's continued attention to the spectrum pipeline. It takes on average 13 years to reallocate spectrum for wireless use. This underscores the need to start today. Policymakers should continue to review federal use of spectrum and consider ways to incentivize agencies to use spectrum more efficiently. Finally, we must modernize our nation's infrastructure siting policies so that wireless networks can be deployed rapidly and efficiently. Current federal, state, local, and tribal siting practices were designed to review large cell towers, not the small cells that will be essential for 5G. Small cells are far less intrusive, the size of a pizza box or a lunch box, and will be deployed by the hundreds of thousands. We can remove barriers to deployment by addressing burdensome local permitting, ensuring access to rights of way and poles, with costs and fees that are reasonable and cost-based, modernizing our historic preservation and environmental review processes, and directing agencies to speed deployment on federal lands and properties. With a continued focus on spectrum and infrastructure, we'll be able to ensure that wireless providers can continue to invest, create jobs, and lead the world in 5G. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. And at this point, our ranking member of the full committee has a unanimous consent request.
To insert my comments into the record on this extremely important subject, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and ranking member of the subcommittee, for holding this hearing.
Without objection, the remarks will be inserted at the appropriate place in the record. Thank you, Senator. And our next witness is Mr. Roger Antner. Sir, you are recognized.
Good morning. Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Schatz, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify this morning. My name is Roger Antner. I'm the founder of Recon Analytics, a telecom research and consulting firm with a focus on wireless. Today, I'm here to discuss my research into the effect that the U.S. mobile industry has on the U.S. economy and to highlight the importance of federal government continuing to free up additional spectrum to support 5G and future network evolutions. First, a quick overview of the U.S. mobile industry. In 2015, Americans spent 2.9 trillion minutes talking on their mobile phones, sent 1.9 trillion text messages, 218 billion pictures, and used 9.6 trillion megabytes of data. U.S. wireless network operators have constructed over 307,000 cell sites. From 2000 to 2015, U.S. network operators have spent $77.8 billion to buy spectrum and have invested $423 billion to build out and expand the capacity and speed of their networks.
Let me turn to innovation and growth. Even as demand for spectrum has increased, the satellite industry has developed ways to use this limited natural resource more efficiently. High-throughput satellites, for example, rely on frequency reuse and spot beam technology to produce increased output factors upwards of 20 times that of traditional satellites, meeting FCC benchmark broadband speeds. The industry has seen similar increases in the capacity of its systems. In another highly anticipated advancement in the industry, hundreds of new high-throughput, non-geostationary satellites will soon provide additional high-speed capacity at low latency levels. Existing high-throughput satellites already support the delivery of 3 and 4G services, and in the future, satellite fleets will be a part of a system architecture that delivers new 5G, IoT, and intelligent connected transportation services to consumers. Advances in commercial remote sensing satellites are also occurring at a rapid pace. SIA member companies are launching satellites that can view and sense the Earth across multiple spectral bands at unparalleled spatial resolutions and with unprecedented global coverage and revisit rates. Data from the U.S. remote sensing operators are building new markets based on geospatial data from agriculture to business intelligence to weather prediction. Of course, all the breakthroughs we've seen because of satellite technologies should not be taken for granted. They depend upon our industry's ability to access spectrum. In order for our industry to sustain and meet the growing demand for satellite services, we encourage regulators to continue to allocate sufficient spectrum for satellite use. Together, we have an opportunity to address the digital divide, meet the growing needs of U.S. consumers, ensure our country's safety and national security, and do so in a manner that utilizes spectrum most efficiently. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stroop, and thank you all for your excellent testimony and for helping us by staying in the time. Now, as I explained earlier, and I've gone over this also with consultation with Senator Schatz, I will now turn the gavel over to Senator Gardner, and I will go vote and immediately come back. At this point, I think it's probably best to recognize Senator Schatz for a question, and then we'll proceed along the list that's been prepared for us by our staff.
Thank you, Chairman Wicker. My first question is for Mr. Heiner. The use of wireless devices in the unlicensed bands is so popular that the Wi-Fi Alliance predicts that we will need another 500 gigahertz of spectrum in the unlicensed bands to accommodate demands by 2025. I'm going to ask you 3 questions just in the interest of time so you can knock them all out in a row. Which bands are the most important for unlicensed spectrum today? What are the industry's plans to identify more bands for unlicensed spectrum? And then, do tech companies generally agree or differ greatly in terms of a strategy for the unlicensed bands?
Well, thank you for those questions, Senator Schatz. I'll answer the first 2 sort of together. We very much need to find and sort of utilize as efficiently as possible additional unlicensed spectrum in the low, mid, and high frequencies. At the low end, around the 600 megahertz after the incentive auction, we have the possibility of really investing very heavily in TV white spaces technology. That's technology that enables signals to travel quite a long distance, 4 or 5 miles, right? It's only, think of like FM radio, 88 to 108 on the dial. Of course, an FM station can cover the whole city. 600 megahertz, not far off from that. So at very low power, we're able to serve an entire community. We have an example of this coming up in Southern Virginia as a test pilot. At the mid-frequencies, that's where most Wi-Fi is today, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, and that's very good spectrum for within a home. It can penetrate a couple of walls. As you know, your signal falls off outside the home, but we'd like more contiguous spectrum next to what we already have to build out, more channels. And then at the high end, at the millimeter waves, the recent Spectrum Frontiers proceeding at the FCC has opened up new spectrum, which we're very enthused about. This spectrum can carry a very heavy throughput, but only for short distances. So we're talking about line of sight. And there's great applications for that technology to be able, for example, to have your PC connect to a monitor with no cables, to stream video within the home, for augmented reality scenarios where you're wearing a headset and devices in the room are actually communicating with the headset via these high millimeter waves. So we very much want to see it in all three bands.
Mr. Heiner, in the interest of time, I'll take the last question for the record so I can get to my second and final question. And this is for Mr. Bergman and Mr. LaPlatney. We all want faster internet service and better wireless service coverage that will result from the current incentive auction, but at the same time, a lot of us are concerned that consumers would lose access to their local broadcast news if channels are forced off the air in the repacking process. And so the question for Mr. Bergman and Mr. LaPlatney is, isn't there a way to balance these concerns and make sure that member companies can deploy quickly after the auction while also protecting our constituents' access to local news? Mr. Bergman first.
Thank you, Senator. So we're absolutely committed to a smooth transition process. We do believe it's important to have timely access to that spectrum. We have confidence that the FCC will be able to stick to its 39-month schedule. The faster we get access to those bands, the faster we can invest, create jobs, and build out our 5G spectrum. And we're very confident that we'll be able to work collaboratively to get that done.
Thank you very much. Mr. LaPlatney.
All right, let's try it again. There we go. Thank you, Senator Schatz, again for your question, and thank you for your leadership on a bill to help address these issues. We believe currently, with the information we have, that both the time and the financial resources are going to be inadequate based on current information. Speaking for Raycom, we got our repack letter about a month ago, and we will have 22 of our stations that will need to be repacked in markets from West Palm Beach, Florida, to Cape Girardeau, Missouri, Evansville, Indiana, and Biloxi, Mississippi. It's a complicated process. For instance, a couple of our markets will have to move from Channel 12 to Channel 8, and that will involve putting a new antenna that's going to weigh potentially thousands of pounds more on an existing tower. And there's all kinds of issues surrounding that. We've begun engineering studies already in a number of these markets, so we're concerned about the timeline. We're concerned about the amount of money, but we will work collaboratively. We will work as quickly as we can to move through the repack, to be as efficient and effective as we can in working on this.
I'd just like to indulge the chairman, if I could have his indulgence for a minute. Mr. Bergman, can we have your commitment, yes or no, to working out a solution that accommodates these very serious concerns?
We're absolutely committed to working with you, with our partners in the broadcast industry. 39 months is an eternity in the wireless industry. As you can imagine, after spending $20 billion to purchase something that's essentially the value of T. Rowe Price or Hilton Hotels or JetBlue 2 times over, we want to make sure to put that spectrum to good use. We'll absolutely work collaboratively with you all to make that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Schatz. Senator Klobuchar. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. I love that the broadcasters are having issues with the microphones. I think we all know how important this topic is. We have a very active broadband caucus, and in fact, Senator Capito and I led a letter that was signed by 48 senators urging the president to include broadband in any kind of infrastructure package, because I think we could really have the potential of making something that's progressing even much bigger. We've also been working on the Dig Once legislation with Senator Gardner and Senator Daines to make it easier to deploy broadband. But I specifically wanted to focus on rural issues. First, Mr. Bergman, part of the Mobile Now Act that I did with Senator Fisher would require the FCC to explore ways to provide incentives for wireless carriers to lease unused spectrum. How could leasing or disaggregating spectrum in rural areas improve wireless service for rural customers?
Senator Klobuchar, thank you for the work that you and Senator Fisher have done on the Rural Spectrum Accessibility Act. We really think that's a creative tool that can help. We recognize that our members compete to expand their service maps. They want to serve the entire country. They took LTE coverage from 0 to over 99% in 7 years. But we recognize that rural areas have particular challenges, geography, topography, fewer people, and we really need to think creatively about how to get there. The legislation that you've worked on is a big part of that. Getting access to that 600 megahertz spectrum will be really important as well, too. It has those propagation characteristics that enable us to provide service in rural areas. So making sure we have that smooth and timely process to get that spectrum put to use is really important.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Stroop, co-chair of the 911 caucus, and Senator Nelson and I actually have announced new legislation, the Generation 911 Act of 2017, to provide more federal funding through the existing 911 grant program. As you know, everything's changed in 911. People are now can have the ability for firefighters to get blueprints of buildings, and for people who get stranded in the woods of Minnesota, that we could use location accuracy to find them. Can you explain how a satellite backup can improve the resiliency of next-gen 911 systems?
Certainly, the satellite networks today have ubiquitous coverage and the opportunity to provide backup communications, whether it's in time of an emergency or when people are lost. So it is the ubiquitous nature of the coverage that allows them to be able to enhance the services that are provided by terrestrial providers.
Thank you. And then finally, Mr. LaPlatney, ensuring our communications networks can effectively support public safety includes natural disasters and emergency events like we have flooding in North Dakota and Minnesota. And these kinds of things can destroy communications infrastructure. How can public safety be enhanced by a next-generation TV standard?
So the next-gen television standard allows for better targeted alerts in emergencies, whether it's flooding or tornadoes or hurricanes. It also has the capability to awake dormant televisions and mobile devices.
Did you just say awake dormant televisions?
Yeah, essentially.
I couldn't help just let that go.
That's
okay.
What does that mean? You're all over me today, Senator. So if you're asleep at 3 a.m. and there's a tornado bearing down on you, this technology has the capability to wake your phone up or wake your television up and say, you are in the path of a storm, please take cover.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So I would turn it on.
Essentially,
your control.
Yeah. Turn it on. Awake it.
Okay. All right. It. So this idea with the new standards with the 911 and what we're working on here could help to make that more standard across the country. So
absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. We're excited about the possibilities on a bipartisan basis here to move forward on broadband as well as enhanced 911 services.
Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, thank you for joining. As a new member, I'm excited to be working with you on this issue. And first of all, let me just say thank you for the bipartisan willingness to work together. The broadcasters from Nevada, and I represent the great state of Nevada, had the same concerns that you just brought out today. And it's nice to hear, Mr. Bergman, you're willing to work with them. And so that's something I will be paying attention to. And then my colleague, talked about rural areas. Nevada